be using like a multi-browser approach to searching for something on the internet. And if you get more skilled with that, you might see that there are certain issues that work best when you combine Safari with this one, and other issues that work best when you to try to use binocular vision or triangulate on a certain problem by using different browsers. This is an analogy. Well, transdisciplinary would involve learning something about the logic of browsing, not necessarily using many browsers, but in a sense getting down to the program language or the logic of browsers as a whole. That's what transdisciplinary would be. We could say that it's moving from the level of disciplinary language or disciplines or discourse to the level of root assumptions or principles, or what we sometimes call paradigms, that are common to the disciplines. Okay, so it's going from the level of discourse to the deeper level of paradigm. That's a key sense of what transdisciplinary is all about. Now, if you look at modern science, including standard ecology, modern science throughout the modern period, standard ecology over the last 100 years, you see that generally it's all happens within a certain paradigm, a certain set of paradigmatic assumptions, including the assumption that the object being studied, which admittedly for ecology is already a kind of holistic thing. It's an organism and its relationship to the environment, so that's good. But it assumes that the person studying it is not part of the system being studied. So there's still the root assumption common to all of the modern sciences, that the subject is somehow separate from the object being studied. Right? This is a root paradigmatic assumption, separation of subject and object, that's common to all of the natural sciences and the most of the social sciences. Okay? Well, a transdisciplinary approach to ecology would challenge, first of all, it would see that this assumption is present in the way that most people do ecology, and it would challenge it. It would try to, it would recognize, just as we now know that we can't understand the biosphere without including the noosphere, culture, psychology, values, and so on. So we can't really understand life, an organism, and its relationship to the environment without including the human relationship to that which is being studied. So this is one idea of transdisciplinary. You could generalize it and say that an integral ecology is transdisciplinary in that it includes articulating and exploring the relationships between the natural sciences and the human sciences. This is the great divide in terms of the disciplinary spectrum, right? You have the natural sciences over here that are objective, the human sciences over here that are subjective. Well, ecology as a science would seem to be on this side of objective, but an integral ecology would recognize that you need to be in dialogue with the human side of things. Okay? But another sense of trans, as Alan said, would be that an integral ecology is transdisciplinary in that it is open to that which is trans, not only in the sense of across, but trans in the sense of beyond the disciplinary mind altogether. The disciplinary mind being the mind that works with conceptual abstractions, which is what I'm doing here, right? So a transdisciplinary approach, which is an integral approach to ecology, would be one that is open to that which is somehow more than just mental, more than just conceptual and abstract. And this leads to point 3, enchanted. Okay, so we've gone from planetary to transdisciplinary to enchanted. We might say that we've gone from body, planetary, to mind, transdisciplinary, and now we're going to spirit, enchanted. So what does that mean? Well, again, the dominant trend throughout the modern period in science and then increasingly in culture has been in the direction of what Max Weber called disenchantment. Right? The world from human origins for 150,000 years at least of our species and throughout all of history was one where the world was enchanted, that it was full of gods and goddesses and spirits and mana and soul and mystery. But increasingly over the last 500 years, and particularly over the last 150 years or so, the world has been spirit has been evacuated from the world. In the dominant Newtonian Cartesian paradigm, the world is a collection of dead objects that somehow the human mind is able to understand and control. So standard ecology, although it is holistic and integrative in that it looks at relationships between organisms and their environments, is still locked in this dominant paradigm that doesn't include the subject, doesn't include the human element, doesn't recognize the noosphere, and tends not to recognize this deeper dimension of mystery, which I'm summarizing by enchanted. I'll just list a couple of possible ways of thinking of enchanted. The first one would be animate, that the earth that we are considering is not only a self-organizing system that we can describe in terms of biosphere, noosphere, and so on and so forth, but that it is actually a living being ensouled, right? Stephen Harding, a friend of mine who teaches at Schumacher College, has written a lovely book called Animate Earth, which is a step toward an integral Gaia theory. And the starting point is the recognition that this earth in, and through which we have our being is itself a living being. Right? The old word for living is animate, right? We talk about inanimate objects and animate objects. Well, something is animate if it has a soul. Anima means soul. So an integral ecology would look upon the earth as ensouled, as alive and ensouled. And what does that mean? Well, it means that we stop looking at the world as a whole or the beings that live in it as objects or its, and instead encounter them as thous, right? So we move from an I-it relationship, as Buber would call it, to an I-thou relationship. And that includes all aspects, not only the living beings, but the sky and the clouds, the wind that caresses our face, and so on. We could say that an enchanted worldview that would be an integral ecological worldview would also be participatory. Again, this is in contrast to the distanced and fragmented view of the dominant scientific paradigm. By participatory, I mean not only the intellectual recognition, but the somatic felt experience and feeling in the heart and intuition in the third eye. That we are embedded within a world that is simultaneously enfolded within us. Okay? Now we know this from contemporary science that, for instance, that each one of our cells manifests within it the whole history of life. Right? If you look at the anatomy of a cell, you see the whole history of the evolution of life on the planet contained in this wondrous interactions of communities of beings that constitute a cell. We know that the brain, right, has these various layers, the reptilian brain, the mammalian brain, the neocortex brain, which recapitulates the evolution of life on the planet. So the body itself is a hologram of the evolution of life on the planet. We know that in our language, when we speak, that we unfold the whole history of thought, not only of our own ethnicity and culture, but through interactions with all cultures, we unfold the whole history of culture and consciousness in the very act of speaking. So each one of us is a hologram of the whole planet, of the whole life. Right? We contain the planet, which contains us. Again, this is this complex relationship of whole and part that we could summarize by the notion of participatory. Finally, for the enchanted, and again, each one of these points in a sense implies all the others, would be the recognition that all of this, even in its crisis, is not some accidental association of otherwise inanimate particles mechanically related, which is how the dominant scientific paradigm would put it, which somehow gave rise to life and accidentally has given rise to the planet as we see it, but rather is a purposeful being. Just as your body is a purposeful being, and each one of your cells is a purposeful being, and your life is a purposeful life. Even if we don't quite know what that purpose is, we sense it in our heart and in our bodies. The planet as a whole is purposeful. It has a direction. It wants to go somewhere. And where it wants to go is to awaken to itself as a planet. each one of us as carriers of that awakening, right? So there is a telos, a purpose. And the purpose is toward greater self-consciousness, greater consciousness of our participation in this mystery that we could call Gaia. Now, what would that consciousness look like? Presumably, it would look like what the great religious and spiritual mystical traditions have talked about for centuries and millennia. Namely, it would look like, lead toward a greater manifestation of what we could call wisdom and compassion, or insight and love. And what would that look like? Well, it would look like greater solidarity at a planetary level, right? We would start to feel and act in certain ways that would enact, affirm, and amplify what we already know in ourselves and in our the inner recesses of our heart, that we are creative participants of this living planet. That leads to the last point, and I've probably gone over my time, so I'll just say it, engaged. Which means that integral ecology is not just a theoretical enterprise. Theory, if it's integral, necessarily feeds into praxis or action, right? Because theory itself is a form of action. When we theorize, we are bringing a world into being in the noosphere, and we know that the noosphere has world-transforming effects. That means we need to take our theories seriously. We need to take our theorizing, our mentalizing seriously, which means also that we recognize that our theories, our thoughts, our speech have implicit within them values. And it's our responsibility and our great, privilege to be able to take these values into the world more explicitly and take positions. Take positions when we have the choice to take positions with regard to policy. And this is true, obviously, in an integral ecological perspective. For all of those policies or decisions that we might have some way of influencing that can resist those forces that would degrade the diversity of life, that would threaten the health and sustainability of the ecosystems upon which we depend, to preserve the diversity of life, and to transform the whole human project in the direction of a life-sustaining society. Now, I could say more, and I have more to say, but I think I've gone over. So I'll end it there, and if we do have any time, maybe we can. We have 5 minutes? Good. I wanted to save 10, but we have 5. So some questions or comments, maybe. We have 5 minutes. There's, okay. Oh, okay. I'm going to just point in the who I saw first. We may not have time for all 4, but okay, please.
Hi, Sean. I just wanted to bring in the more far-out aspect. I've seen some esoteric writings that suggest that the
Yeah, all kinds of directions one could go, whether a theosophical or anthroposophical or magical or yeah, you can go in that direction, and there are people that do that. You know, those of you who are interested in the 2012 phenomenon, for instance, many people believe that we are at a point now where, right in the middle of a 30-year period, basically, where the Earth is aligning for the first time in 25,000 years with the galactic center. Actually, the first time in 12,000 years. It does it 2 times in a 25,000-year cycle. Aligning with galactic center, and that this is corresponding synchronistically to all kinds of other alignments with, you might call, energies. Or so yeah, one can go in that direction. And I'm personally very fascinated by these types of discussions. At the same time, I'm also wary of taking our gaze too far away from the Earth, because things are so critical right now that the Earth is where things are happening for us now. Now, some people may feel individually called to tune into these subtler dimensions, and I think that's great. But personally, I'm trying to restrain my tendency to do that. a little bit and focus a bit more on the Earth, at least until we get through this critical transition. But thank you for bringing that up. Well, see, the Cenozoic is a geological period that began 65 million years ago when an asteroid hit the planet and wiped out not only the dinosaurs, but the great majority of the complex life forms on the planet. Now, that led, luckily, to the rise of the mammals and eventually to human beings, and eventually to our species about 150,000 years ago. Okay. Now, but that's fairly small. 65 million years and then 150,000 years ago is pretty small. The mean temperature of the Earth has been relatively, there's been an oscillation through the ice ages, but it's been oscillating around a certain medium throughout most of that 65 million years. Now, particularly through the last 10,000 years, which is the last bit of the Cenozoic, and it's called the Holocene, after the last ice age, for the last 10,000 years, the mean temperature of the Earth has been stable with a variation of no more than, 1 degree either way. It's also during that period, the latter part of this 65 million years and up until 10,000 years ago, that the Earth has seen the greatest degree of biodiversity ever in the whole history of life on the planet, the most number of species and so on. Okay. That period is coming to an end because there's already the consensus among scientists is that within 30 to 50 years, more than half of all species on the planet will be permanently gone. Not just individuals or populations, but species. And when these species are gone, they're gone forever. Not only that, but the habitats upon